A German Shepherd puppy lay still beneath a fallen metal sheet until a U.S. Marine lifted the weight. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. He wasn't supposed to survive. That thought lingers in the air like dust caught in late-day sunlight, barely moving, barely alive. The fallen sheet of metal rests heavy over a small rise of earth, silent except for the wind brushing against its edges. Underneath it, hidden from the world, a German Shepherd puppy lies still, so small, so quiet it almost disappears into the hush of the forgotten junkyard. The scent of rust hangs thick, mingling with the cool November breeze that slides through rows of abandoned scrap. Light glints off broken glass, off twisted pipes, off the dull gray steel that has become a prison for a life too young to understand fear. There is no sound from beneath it. No cry. No scratch. Just a faint warmth trapped under cold weight. And miles away from where he thought his path would ever lead him, Sergeant Caleb Hunter steps through the dirt, boots pressing into the soft ground with a slow, deliberate rhythm. He walks as a man who has lived through storms no one saw, carrying silence the way other men carry packs. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows behind him, stretching across the baked earth like pieces of his past trying to keep up. He pauses near the scattered debris. Something, he can't explain what, pulls him to turn his head, just slightly, the way instinct sometimes whispers before thought arrives. Caleb breathes in. The smell of rust. The cool bite of coming dusk. And something else. A quiet wrongness. He moves closer to the fallen sheet, steps careful, breath steady. The wind shifts again, brushing the edge of metal just enough to reveal a sliver of fur beneath it. Sable. Soft. Too still. Caleb kneels, the ground cool beneath his palm as he steadies himself. He lifts the edge of the metal. With one hand, testing its weight. It groans in protest, a low scrape that echoes across the empty lot. A soft hush of air escapes from beneath it, warm against his wrist, so faint he almost mistakes it for his imagination. But then he sees it. A tiny chest, barely rising. A heartbeat struggling to stay. Caleb leans closer, his voice dropping to a whisper shaped by instinct, by compassion, by something older than either. Little one. I'm right here. The wind grows quiet around them as if listening, as if waiting to see whether hope will answer. And Caleb Hunter, without knowing why this moment feels like a hinge in his life, reaches for the corner of the metal again, because sometimes, even the smallest breath deserves a chance to be lifted back toward the light. Caleb braces his shoulder, lifting the metal sheet higher until the fading sunlight spills softly over the small form beneath it. Ash lies curled tight, as if trying to hold on to the last bit of warmth left in the world. The puppy's fur is dusty, faintly matted, and when Caleb slides his hand beneath the fragile body, he feels the tremor of a breath that barely manages to rise. It is enough to make him pause, enough to make his own heartbeat shift. The air around them grows still, as if the day itself is holding its breath for this tiny life. Caleb holds Ash gently against his chest, the way someone might cradle a promise they are afraid to break. The puppy is warm but weak, so light it feels as though the world has asked far too much of something so small. Caleb whispers, almost without thinking, "I have got you," and the words drift into the quiet like a vow. The sky above the junkyard turns a deeper gold as the sun sinks lower. Dust floats in the air, catching the light and shimmering for a brief moment before settling again. Caleb walks toward his truck, boots brushing through the dry grass, each step slow, steady, careful not to disturb the pup's fragile calm. Ash gives a faint sigh, a sound so soft Caleb almost wonders if he imagined it, but then the pup shifts ever so slightly, leaning into the warmth of his chest. Caleb opens the truck door with one hand and settles into the seat, placing Ash on his lap. The tiny heartbeat against his palm feels like a fragile drum, fighting to keep rhythm. The engine hums to life, a low vibration that fills the cabin with a familiar comfort. For a moment Caleb sits still, breathing in the scent of old leather and dust, letting the weight of the moment settle. The wind presses gently against the windows as if urging him to move, to act, to protect the small soul resting in his hands. He glances down and sees Ash's paw twitch, not from distress but something quieter, something like a memory of movement. The pup's eyes remain closed, but there is a faint determination in the tiny breaths that rise and fall. Caleb speaks softly, "Stay with me, little one," the way someone might speak to a friend they have not met yet but somehow already know. He pulls onto the road, the tires crunching over gravel before finding smoother ground. The world outside passes in streaks of gold and shadow, and with every mile the air grows cooler. Caleb shifts his jacket, creating a small pocket of warmth where Ash can breathe easier. A gentle hum escapes the puppy, a sound that settles into the space between them with surprising tenderness. Caleb keeps one hand on the wheel and one resting lightly over Ash, feeling each breath, each small tremor of life refusing to fade. In that quiet stretch of road, with the sun dipping behind the trees and the world growing softer by the minute, Caleb senses something he has not felt in a long time. Not certainty. Not clarity. Just the beginning of hope, fragile and warm, nestled in his arms like a story not yet told. The road unwinds beneath the truck as the first cool threads of evening slip through the cracked window, carrying the scent of pine and distant chimney smoke. Caleb keeps his eyes forward, but every few seconds he glances down at the small bundle resting inside his jacket. Ash's breathing is still shallow, yet steadier than before, each rise of the tiny chest a quiet defiance against the fading light. The pup's head shifts slightly, brushing against the fabric, seeking warmth the way a fragile flame leans toward shelter. Caleb adjusts his jacket to cocoon the puppy, feeling the subtle tremor of life press into his palm. A memory flickers across his thoughts, uninvited but gentle. This time. Sand. Heat. The soft weight of another shepherd pup he once carried during a deployment far from this quiet road. Not the pain of those days, but the reminder that even in broken places, small lives had a way of finding him. His fingers curl protectively around Ash. The sky deepens into amber and lavender hues as the sun dips lower, painting the world in colors that ask for stillness. Caleb turns toward town, the tires humming softly over the asphalt. He tries to steady his breath, matching it to the tiny rhythm against his chest. "Easy," he murmurs, the word barely louder than the engine's warmth. Ash responds with the faintest sound, not a whine but a breath shaped by effort, by trying, by holding on. The clinic's sign appears at the end of the street, its porch light casting a low glow across the gravel lot. Caleb pulls in, parking beneath the old oak tree whose branches sway gently as though greeting him. The moment he cuts the engine, silence settles over the truck like a soft blanket. He stays still for a heartbeat, then another, sensing the shift in the air. Ash's tiny paws move again, a slow curling motion, as if testing the edges of strength that have only just begun to return. Caleb lifts him carefully, holding him close as he steps out of the truck. The crisp air brushes his face, carrying the scent of earth cooling after a long day. Each footstep crunches softly over the gravel, the rhythm grounding, patient, deliberate. The porch light flickers once, then steadies, glowing warmly over the doorway. Inside, through the window, Caleb sees the faint movement of someone sweeping, closing up for the evening. He hesitates, not wanting to impose, but Ash shifts again, nudging his chin gently against Caleb's jacket with surprising determination for something so small. It is enough. Caleb taps lightly on the door. The sound is soft, almost reluctant, but the woman inside looks up immediately. She is older, wearing a sweater the color of moss and kindness in her tired eyes. She unlocks the door without question, her expression changing the moment she sees what he carries. "Come in," she says, her voice quiet but certain, as if she has been waiting without knowing why. Caleb steps into the warm light, and Ash lifts his head the slightest fraction. Guided not by strength but by trust, as though sensing that this threshold might be the start of something gentler than the world he came from. The warm light of the clinic wraps around Caleb the moment the door closes behind him, carrying the gentle scent of antiseptic and lavender soap. The woman in the moss-colored sweater guides him toward a small examination table, her footsteps soft against the worn linoleum floor. Her name tag reads Dr. Miriam Hale, the kind of name that sounds like it has weathered years of tending to fragile lives. She gestures for Caleb to place the puppy down, but Ash clings to the warmth of his jacket, a tiny paw curling instinctively into the fabric. Caleb hesitates, then lowers himself onto a nearby stool, keeping the pup close while giving the doctor room to work. Dr. Hale studies Ash with the quiet focus of someone who knows that hope often hides inside the smallest movements. She asks no unnecessary questions, only murmurs gentle words meant to settle the air rather than fill it. Her hands move slowly, respectfully, the way one might approach a flickering candle. Caleb shifts his jacket open just enough for her to see Ash's face. The pup's eyes are still closed, but his breath whispers against Caleb's palm, light and rhythmic. Dr. Hale listens, pressing the stethoscope along the fragile ribcage. She nods once, encouraging but cautious. "He is exhausted," she says softly. "Cold. Dehydrated. But his heartbeat is steady. That is a very good sign." Caleb releases a breath he had not realized he was holding. The tension in his shoulders loosens, replaced by something quieter, something like gratitude washing in with the steady hum of the clinic lights. Ash shifts when Dr. Hale lifts him, a small tremor of surprise at losing Caleb's warmth. The doctor cups him gently and wraps a soft towel around the tiny body. The pup responds with a faint sigh, a sound that could almost be relief. Caleb watches as she prepares a small heating pad and places Ash upon it, adjusting the towel around him like a cradle. The glow from the lamp beside the table casts a soft halo over the pup's sable fur, turning each strand into a thread of fragile light. He looks impossibly small there, but for the first time, he looks safe. Dr. Hale mixes a warm electrolyte solution and draws a measured amount into a tiny dropper. Ash responds weakly at first, his mouth barely parting, but after a moment he accepts another drop, then another. Each swallow is a soft victory, each breath a quiet return. Caleb's voice lowers, instinctive and steady. "You are doing good, little one." The doctor glances at him with a knowing warmth. Animals hear the heart more than the words. He knows you are here. Outside, the wind brushes against the windows, carrying the distant sound of a passing car and the soft rustle of fallen leaves. Inside, the room feels almost sacred in its stillness, as if time itself has slowed to give this tiny life a gentler place to land. Ash curls tighter into the towel, drifting between awareness and rest. Caleb steps closer, placing a steady hand near the pup's head, not touching, just close enough to offer presence. Ash lifts his tiny nose toward that warmth, leaning into the air as if he can sense the shape of the one who found him beneath the weight of forgotten metal. And in that small, quiet motion, something inside Caleb settles, as if a connection has been made not with hands, but with the simple, unspoken trust of a soul choosing not to give up. Dr. Hale steps away for a moment to prepare a small nest of blankets inside a shallow carrier, leaving Caleb beside the examination table where Ash rests. The soft hum of the heating pad surrounds them, a steady whisper that seems to cradle the tiny heartbeat fighting its way back into rhythm. Caleb watches the rise and fall of Ash's chest, each breath fragile but present, like a candle flame leaning into a gentle hand. The pup's ears twitch faintly at the distant sound of a phone ringing somewhere in the back office, and for an instant Caleb sees a spark of instinct beneath the exhaustion, a small reminder that life still stirs beneath the fur and dust. Dr. Hale returns carrying the carrier lined with flannel the color of warm sunrise. She places it on the table, her voice low and reassuring as she says, "He will need rest more than anything. Warmth, quiet, and time." Caleb nods, the words settling into him like a soft directive he is ready to follow. When she lifts Ash from the heating pad, the puppy turns his small head toward Caleb's chest, seeking the warmth he had grown used to during the drive. Caleb reaches out, offering his palm. Ash leans into it, a tiny nuzzle, weak but sure, as if anchoring himself to the presence that found him when the world felt too heavy. Dr. Hale smiles gently. He knows your scent. That is a good sign. It means he feels safe with you. The overhead light casts a warm glow across the room, dimming the sharp edges of the counters and cabinets, turning the clinic into something softer, almost like a shelter for wandering souls. Caleb watches as Ash is laid into the nest of blankets. The pup curls immediately, instinctively, the towel still wrapped lightly around his small frame. His breathing settles into a slower, steadier pattern, as if the weight he carried all day has finally lifted. Caleb kneels beside the carrier, his hand resting near the edge without touching, simply offering presence. Ash noses toward the warmth again, his tiny paw stretching out until it finds the back of Caleb's fingers. It rests there, barely the weight of a feather, but enough to hold Caleb completely still. Something quiet fills the space between them, not loud enough to be called relief, not bright enough to be called triumph, but something tender that rises like dawn after a long night. Dr. Hale steps aside, giving them a moment, her expression kind but deliberate, as though recognizing that this connection is as essential to healing as any treatment she could offer. Outside, a gust of wind presses against the window, carrying the faint scent of evening rain. Inside, the small room grows warmer, softer, safer. Ash's tiny breaths slow further, settling into a rhythm that feels like a promise trying to take shape. Caleb watches, steady and grounded, feeling the fragile trust resting across his hand. And as Ash drifts into a deep, needed sleep, Caleb senses the beginning of something he did not expect, a quiet bond forming in the stillness, like a thread pulled gently through two lives that had never meant to cross but somehow found their way to the same quiet moment. Night settles gently around the small clinic, drawing long shadows across the floor as the overhead lights soften to a warm glow. Dr. Hale finishes her notes at the counter while Caleb remains beside the carrier. Unwilling to let distance come between him and the tiny heartbeat resting in the blankets. Ash sleeps deeply, the kind of sleep that comes only when exhaustion loosens its grip, leaving room for the body to remember how to heal. His breaths are slow and even, each one a quiet reassurance in the stillness of the room. Caleb watches the rhythmic rise and fall of the little chest, feeling something settle inside him, something he has not felt in a long time. A sense of purpose that does not demand strength or sacrifice, only presence. Dr. Hale approaches, her voice soft enough not to disturb the pup. He has made it through the hardest part of the evening, she says, folding her hands gently. But the next few hours matter. His body is still catching up. Caleb nods, his gaze never fully leaving the small bundle. I can stay, he says, the words instinctive. The doctor smiles, not surprised. I thought you might say that. There is a chair in the recovery room. You can sit with him while he rests. She leads him down a short hallway into a room dimly lit by a single lamp. A padded chair sits beside a low table where she places the carrier. Caleb lowers himself into the chair, the cushion creaking softly under his weight. The room is quiet except for the faint hum of an air vent and Ash's soft breaths. Time slows into something gentle. Minutes pass like drifting leaves. Caleb leans back, letting his shoulders settle, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the carrier where Ash's tiny paw had reached for him earlier. Now the pup sleeps without stirring, his small body curled into a warm crescent of fur and blanket. The quiet allows old memories to surface, not the loud ones filled with dust and command shouts, but the softer ones. A training base at dawn. A young shepherd pup nudging at his boots. A promise he once made to take care of those who could not ask for help. He inhales slowly, grounding himself in the present as Ash exhales a tiny sigh that feels like acceptance. The lamp casts a gentle circle of light over them, turning the room into a cocoon where the world outside cannot intrude. Dr. Hale checks on them once more before stepping out, leaving the door slightly ajar. Caleb watches the doorway for a moment, then returns his attention to Ash. The pup's ear flickers once, as if sensing the movement in the room even in sleep. Caleb lowers his hand until his fingers rest near the soft curve of Ash's head without touching, offering warmth without pressure. Ash shifts, leaning into the nearness with instinctive trust. That small motion pulls something deep inside Caleb, something that feels like the quiet beginning of healing he had not expected to find tonight. The world outside the clinic continues on, unaware of the fragile life curled in blankets or the Marine keeping silent watch beside him. But in this small room, in the hush of a late evening, a bond begins to take root, soft and steady, like the first breath after a long wait is lifted. The hour grows later, and the quiet inside the recovery room deepens into something close to reverence. A soft glow from the lamp paints warm edges on the walls, while shadows stretch long and gentle across the floor. Caleb sits unmoving in the padded chair, his posture steady yet softened by the presence of the tiny life resting only inches away. Ash continues to sleep, curled into the flannel nest, his breath small but sure. Every few minutes, one ear twitches, or a paw shifts slightly, tiny signs that his body is slowly reclaiming strength. Caleb watches each movement with careful attention, his gaze carrying the same patience he once held during long nights overseas when waiting was an act of duty, not choice. But this waiting feels different. It feels like guarding something fragile, something entrusted to him not by command but by circumstance and quiet grace. Outside the door, the faint murmur of Dr. Hale speaking with a late caller drifts through the hallway, softened by distance. The rain that had threatened earlier finally arrives, tapping gently against the clinic's windows in a slow, rhythmic pattern. The scent of damp earth mixes with the warm air of the room, grounding everything in a calm that feels rare and full. Ash shifts again, a subtle stretch beneath the blankets, and his small nose lifts as if searching for something familiar. Caleb leans forward slightly, resting his hand near the edge of the carrier where the pup can sense it. Almost immediately, Ash's tiny body settles, curling back into rest with a faint sigh. Caleb feels the sound more than he hears it, a soft reassurance that the little one knows he is not alone. For a moment Caleb closes his eyes, letting the quiet work its way into the places inside him that have gone untouched for too long. The room hums with warmth, and the rhythmic rain feels like a lullaby the world forgot it knew. Caleb opens his eyes again when Dr. Hale steps quietly into the doorway, her sweater sleeves pushed up, her expression gentle with understanding. "He is responding well," she whispers, mindful of the fragile peace in the room. "His temperature is rising slowly, right where we need it to be." Caleb nods, relieved. "How long should he rest before we move him?" She considers. "At least another hour. Let him settle. His body is doing the work now." She leaves as quietly as she arrived, the door closing with a soft click that blends smoothly with the rain outside. Ash stirs again, lifting his head just enough to blink, his eyes half open and hazy with fatigue. He looks toward the edge of the carrier, toward the scent and presence he recognizes. Caleb moves his hand a little closer, and the pup leans against his fingers, his tiny body trembling with the effort but filled with intent. It is not a cry for help. It is a reaching, a choosing. Caleb breathes out slowly, almost reverently, letting the moment settle deep in him. The weight of the world feels lighter here, in this small room with rain tapping on the windows and a fragile life trusting him without hesitation. Ash's eyes close again, his breathing soft and steady as he drifts back to sleep. Caleb remains beside him, silent and still, keeping watch the way one keeps watch over something precious, something that has quietly found its way into the spaces where hope had grown thin. Rain continues to patter softly against the clinic windows as the night deepens, turning the world outside into a watercolor of distant streetlights and blurred shadows. Inside the recovery room, the warm lamp glows like a small sun, steady and patient. Caleb remains in the padded chair, his posture unchanged except for the subtle movement of his hand resting near Ash's nest. The pup has been sleeping for a long stretch, curled into the flannel with his tiny nose tucked beneath one paw, the slow rise and fall of his breathing forming a quiet rhythm that fills the room more completely than the hum of the air vent. But somewhere in that stillness, a fragile shift begins. It is small at first, barely more than a tremble in the blanket. Then Ash's ears twitch, not from discomfort but from the faint instinct of waking. Caleb leans forward, his breath held without realizing, watching as the pup stirs with delicate effort. Ash lifts his head an inch, then pauses, blinking at the soft orange glow of the lamp. His eyes are hazy, glassy with exhaustion, but they are open. Open enough to reflect the warm light, open enough to find Caleb's silhouette beside him. For a heartbeat the room feels completely still, as if the very air is listening. Caleb lowers his hand, offering it without touching, letting the puppy decide whether to close the space. Slowly, with the fragile determination of a life trying to return to itself, Ash leans forward until his tiny nose brushes Caleb's fingertips. It is not a strong movement. It is not even steady. But it is purposeful. A small, seeking gesture. A sign of life where there had almost been none. Caleb feels the breath that slips from him as relief, quiet and deep, softening the rigid worry that has been sitting in his chest for hours. "Easy, little one," he whispers, the words shaped not to command but to comfort. Ash's tail gives the faintest twitch beneath the blankets, a tiny tap of acknowledgement, or trust, or perhaps simply recognition. He tries to move a little more, shifting his weight and lifting his chin toward the warmth of Caleb's hand, but the effort overtakes him quickly. His small body wavers, and he releases a soft exhale, barely audible. Caleb steadies him with just the nearness of his palm, not touching, just anchoring. The pup settles again, laying his head across the curve of the towel, his eyes drifting halfway closed yet refusing to surrender completely to sleep. There is a flicker of spirit now, faint but unmistakable, glowing like a coal hidden beneath ash. When Dr. Hale steps quietly into the doorway, she pauses at the sight, her expression softening. "He is waking sooner than I expected," she murmurs. Caleb nods, his voice low. "He is trying." The doctor steps closer, careful not to disrupt. The fragile moment. Some animals wait for a presence they trust before they let themselves come back. Caleb glances down at Ash, who is watching him through half-lidded eyes, holding on to awareness with fragile resolve. The rain outside softens to a drizzle, the sound barely a whisper now. The world is quiet, almost reverent. And in that small room, beneath the warm glow of a single lamp, a fragile life edges closer to the world again, guided not by strength, but by the soft, steady presence of the one who lifted the weight that had nearly ended it. The drizzle outside fades into a distant hush, leaving the night wrapped in a stillness that feels almost sacred. Inside the small recovery room, the warm lamplight glows softly over Ash's fragile body, turning the flannel nest into a tiny island of safety. Caleb stays where he has been for hours, one hand near the carrier, offering quiet presence as the pup stirs in slow, uncertain waves of awareness. Ash blinks once, twice, as though testing the edges of returning consciousness. His breaths quicken for a moment, small and irregular, then steady again as the warmth of the blankets holds him close. Caleb leans forward, his voice a low whisper meant not to startle but to anchor. "It is all right. Take your time." The pup's eyes drift toward the sound, unfocused but searching. His tiny paw lifts from the blanket, trembling softly in the still air before it falls gently against Caleb's fingers. The touch is feather-light yet full of intent, as if Ash is reaching not for rescue this time, but for reassurance, for confirmation that the presence he felt beneath the weight of metal is still here. Caleb feels a quiet shift inside, something warm spreading through the steady calm he has been holding. The doctor had said the next hours mattered, but she had not said how much a heartbeat could change a room. Ash inhales, a small breath with a slight hitch to it, and then, almost too faint to notice, he lets out a soft sound, something between a sigh and a murmur. It is not distress. It is effort. Life edging forward again. Dr. Hale steps in gently, her sweater sleeves pushed up, her eyes softening at the scene before her. "He is trying to wake fully," she murmurs. "This is a good sign." Caleb glances up, worry still threading his expression. "He seems weak." The doctor nods. "He is. But weakness is not the same as giving up." She kneels beside the carrier, watching Ash carefully as the pup attempts to lift his head again. It wobbles, unsteady, before settling onto Caleb's fingers once more. "He knows you," she says quietly. Sometimes, recognition is the first real step back. Ash shifts again, a tiny motion of will rising through exhaustion. His breaths deepen, then even out. His eyes, though half-lidded, remain open long enough for Caleb to see a glimmer of something that was not there before, a small spark that looks suspiciously like fight. Or trust. Or both. The room feels warmer somehow, as if the air itself has leaned closer. The faint scent of rain drifts in through the slightly open window, mixing with the soft aroma of antiseptic and flannel. Caleb places his palm just inside the carrier, not touching the pup but offering closeness, warmth, presence. Ash responds with a faint nuzzle, barely more than a brush of fur against skin, yet full of meaning in its smallness. Dr. Hale rises slowly, her voice calm. "Let him rest again. His body is telling us he wants to stay." The words settle in the room like a benediction. Ash's eyes close, but this time not with the heavy drop of exhaustion. They close with intention, with the quiet surrender of something choosing sleep rather than collapsing into it. Caleb remains beside him, steady and silent, listening to the tiny breaths that now fill the room with a rhythm that feels stronger than before. And as the minutes pass, he senses the moment he has been waiting for, the shift from fear of losing the pup to the fragile, blooming belief that he just might make it. The night deepens into a gentle silence, the kind that settles only when the world has given everything it can and finally grows quiet. Inside the small recovery room, the warm lamplight softens as if exhaling with the tired hours. Caleb sits exactly where he has been, his hand resting near the carrier, his presence steady as a heartbeat. Ash sleeps again, but it is different now. Not the heavy, uncertain sleep of a body fighting its way back from the edge, but a calmer rest, a deeper settling. His breaths come smoothly, each one a small, steady claim on life. The faint movements beneath the blanket are unhurried, as though his body is finally allowed to rest rather than retreat. Caleb listens to that rhythm, and with every rise and fall of the tiny chest, something inside him unwinds, loosening a knot he did not realize had been pulled so tight. He leans forward slightly, not out of concern now, but out of quiet awe. The fragile spark he had seen earlier has grown into a steady glow. Dr. Hale returns with a clipboard tucked under her arm, her step soft so as not to break the fragile calm. She stops beside Caleb, her eyes warm with a mix of relief and admiration. "His progress is encouraging," she says softly. "The warmth and fluids are doing their job. But the real difference," she glances at Caleb with a knowing smile. "The real difference is that he has not been alone." Caleb looks down at Ash, the small bundle curled into the blankets. "I was just in the right place," he murmurs, though even as he says it, he feels the truth shifting beneath the words. The doctor shakes her head gently. "Right place, yes. But also the right person." The statement lingers in the room like a soft light, neither requiring response nor expecting one. She checks Ash's temperature, her movements gentle. The thermometer's faint beep breaks the stillness before she reads the number and nods with visible satisfaction. Exactly where it should be. He is stabilizing. A breath escapes Caleb, long and quiet, as if the relief has been waiting for permission to show itself. Ash stirs at the sound, his tiny head shifting toward the familiar voice. He noses his way out of the blanket an inch, blinking sleepily in Caleb's direction. The pup's eyes glimmer beneath heavy lids, unfocused but seeking. His small muzzle opens in what might be the beginning of a soft whimper, but instead a faint exhale floats into the air. Caleb lowers his hand inside the carrier, offering warmth. Ash responds immediately, leaning his tiny head into the curve of Caleb's palm, as if it is the one constant the world has offered him. The doctor watches quietly, her smile deepening. "He trusts you," she says. "That is something we cannot teach. It just happens." Outside, the drizzle has stopped, leaving a clean, cool stillness in its wake. A breeze. slips through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. It mingles with the soft light, the warmth, the breathing of two lives that have somehow woven themselves together over the span of a single night. Caleb brushes one finger gently along the edge of Ash's ear. The pup's breath slow again, easing back into sleep, but this time his small body settles with certainty rather than surrender. And as Caleb watches over him, he feels a quiet truth rising inside, the kind that does not need to be spoken to be real. This little life, against every odd, is finding its way back. The early hours of morning begin to press gently against the clinic windows, turning the darkness outside into a soft gray that hints at dawn. Inside the recovery room, the lamplight glows steadily, holding back the night for just a little longer. Caleb has not moved far from the padded chair. He sits forward now, elbows resting lightly on his knees, watching the tiny German shepherd curled in the flannel nest. Ash's breathing is slow and even, the sure rhythm of a body no longer drifting at the edge but beginning to claim its place again. The pup shifts slightly, rolling his small shoulders beneath the blanket, and a faint sound escapes him, something between a sigh and a soft murmur. Caleb feels the corner of his mouth lift, not quite a smile, but the beginning of one. For a moment he allows himself to breathe in the stillness, the kind that comes only when fear has loosened its grip and hope begins to settle into the empty spaces it left behind. Dr. Hale enters with a mug of warm tea, the scent of chamomile drifting through the air. She sets it beside Caleb, her expression gentle. "You have been here all night," she says softly, though her tone carries no reprimand. "He would have asked me to stay," Caleb replies quietly, glancing down at the small form in the carrier. "I just answered the request before he could make it." The doctor chuckles under her breath, then kneels to check Ash's temperature once more. The thermometer gives a soft beep, and she nods with visible relief. Perfect. His body is catching up quickly. He will still need rest, but the danger has passed. Caleb releases a breath he did not know. He had been holding, the air leaving him like a quiet surrender to gratitude. Ash stirs at the sound, lifting his head just a fraction. His eyes blink open, clearer than before, soft reflections of the lamplight dancing across their dark surface. He looks first at the doctor, then slowly turns toward Caleb, as if drawn by a familiar pull. Caleb places his hand near the edge of the carrier, and Ash responds without hesitation. The pup pushes his tiny head against the Marine's fingers, leaning into the touch with a gentleness that speaks louder than words could. Dr. Hale observes them with a softened gaze. "He chose you long before he had the strength to show it," she says. Ash moves again, attempting to stretch his front paws. One reaches out toward Caleb's palm, the tiny pads pressing against his skin with hesitant determination. His body wobbles from the effort, but the intent is unmistakable. Caleb steadies him with a slight motion of his hand, offering warmth and balance without taking away the pup's fragile sense of accomplishment. "Easy," he murmurs, "take it slow." Ash noses forward, pressing his muzzle into Caleb's palm as though confirming the voice, the scent, the presence that carried him from darkness into light. The clinic room softens under the glow of dawn creeping in around the curtains. The rain has stopped, leaving the world smelling of wet earth and quiet beginnings. Dr. Hale rises from her crouch, brushing her hands gently against her sweater. "He is well enough now to go home with you for the day," she says. "He will need careful watching, warmth, and small feedings, but he is strong enough to be with the person he trusts most." Caleb looks up at her, the weight of the night settling into the realization of what comes next. He turns back to Ash, who meets his gaze with eyes that hold more awareness than before. A quiet bond pulses in the space between them, tender and steady, woven through shared breaths and the fragile miracle of life choosing to stay. Caleb slides his hand under the pup, lifting him with a gentleness shaped by instinct and reverence. Ash curls immediately against his chest, settling into the familiar warmth as if returning to the place where hope first took root. And as the first rays of morning light spill across the room, they rest there together, two hearts finding comfort in the simple truth that neither of them has to walk forward alone. The morning light gathers slowly along the clinic walls, turning the edges of the room soft and golden as if dawn itself wishes to step quietly so it does not disturb the fragile peace inside. Caleb rises from the padded chair with Ash held securely against his chest, the small pup nestled into the crook of his arm like he has belonged there all along. The warmth of Ash's tiny body radiates through Caleb's shirt, steady and alive, a heartbeat that answers the long night's unspoken prayers. Dr. Hale walks beside them, guiding him toward the front of the clinic with calm assurance. Her presence feels like the final thread in a long, careful tapestry of survival. "Keep him close to your body for a while," she says softly. "Your warmth will help him regulate his temperature. And offer small amounts of food throughout the day. He will tell you what he can manage." Caleb nods, absorbing every word, though most of his attention remains on the pup whose head rests beneath his chin. Ash stirs, lifting his tiny face enough for his nose to brush the fabric of Caleb's collar. The gentle nudge feels like a silent thank you, or perhaps a quiet acknowledgement that he knows he is safe in these arms. The clinic door opens with a low chime as Caleb steps out. The cool morning air greets them, freshened by the night's rain. Puddles reflect the soft blush of dawn, and the trees whisper with the light breeze drifting through their branches. Ash shivers slightly at the temperature change, prompting Caleb to draw him closer, shielding him with the fold of his jacket. The pup settles immediately, trusting that warmth without hesitation. As they walk toward the truck, Caleb notices how the world seems different in the early light. The gravel glistens faintly. The wet earth carries the scent of renewal. Even the distant sound of a passing car feels gentler than usual. He opens the passenger door carefully and sits sideways on the seat, keeping Ash close while preparing a small blanket in his lap. The pup looks up at him with eyes still hazy from the night's effort but brighter now, holding a flicker of recognition that was not there before. "You are doing good," Caleb murmurs, adjusting the blanket so Ash can rest safely. "One step at a time." Ash stretches one tiny paw toward him, placing it lightly on his forearm before curling into the blanket. The gesture is small, but it carries a weight that settles deep inside Caleb, echoing something familiar and forgotten. A moment of connection that does not need words to declare its meaning. He starts the truck, letting the engine warm the cabin. The heater hums softly as warm air fills the space, wrapping both man and pup in a gentle cocoon. Ash breathes deeper, his eyelids drooping as he leans his head against Caleb's hand. As Caleb pulls out of the gravel lot, he glances toward the clinic one last time. The windows glow with soft light, the place where a fragile life found its way back from the brink. But the pup in his lap, alive, warm, trusting, feels like the real reminder of what has been restored. The road ahead unfolds beneath the tires, washed clean by the night's rain. The sky continues to brighten, painting the horizon in quiet colors of hope. Ash shifts once more, nestling closer as if feeling the promise of what comes next. And in that tender silence, Caleb recognizes the truth settling into the early morning light: faith does not need proof to be real. Sometimes it arrives as a breath, a heartbeat, a tiny paw resting against your arm, reminding you that even in the smallest of lives, grace can find its way through. The road home winds gently beneath the truck's tires, carrying Caleb and the tiny pup through the quiet calm of a morning washed clean by rain. Pale sunlight filters through the windshield, casting soft gold across the dashboard and warming the small blanket where Ash rests. The heater hums low, filling the cab with steady warmth as Caleb drives slowly, careful not to jostle the fragile life curled in his lap. Ash shifts, lifting his head just enough for his nose to nudge the back of Caleb's hand. The gesture is small, almost sleepy, but it carries a certainty that was not there before. Caleb lets his fingers brush lightly over the pup's fur, feeling the softness that had been cold and still only hours ago. Now it feels warm, alive, returning. The road opens into a stretch of countryside where fields glisten with early dew. The trees sway gently, their branches holding pockets of sunlight that ripple with each passing breeze. Ash watches the changing light with half-lidded curiosity, his eyes reflecting the soft glow. When Caleb finally turns onto the gravel driveway of his small cabin, the crunch beneath the tires echoes through the quiet morning. The cabin stands at the edge of a wooded clearing, framed by tall pines and the faint shimmer of moisture caught in their needles. It is humble, weathered, but wrapped in the kind of stillness that invites rest. Caleb steps out of the truck carefully, cradling Ash close to his chest. The pup curls into him, trusting the warmth, trusting the hands that carried him from darkness into something gentler. Inside the cabin, the air is cool and still. Caleb sets a small quilt near the fireplace, then kneels to place Ash upon it. The pup wobbles slightly as he settles, blinking up at the new space with slow, cautious wonder. Caleb starts a small fire, the crackle of the first sparks filling the room with the soft music of home. Warm light flickers across the floor, brushing over Ash's tiny form. The pup inches closer to the heat, then looks back at Caleb with eyes that hold a quiet question, or perhaps a simple acknowledgement. Caleb sits beside him, resting his hand near the quilt. Ash places one small paw upon his fingers, the same instinctive gesture he made in the clinic, but this time steadier, filled with intention rather than desperation. The connection settles between them like a thread of light, soft but unbreakable. As the fire grows, so does the sense of peace in the room. The morning carries on outside, but inside the cabin, time slows to the rhythm of a tiny heartbeat and the soft whisper of flames. Ash curls beside Caleb's leg, his breath warm and even, his body finally allowed to rest without fear. And Caleb, watching the small miracle asleep against him, feels something return, something he thought had been lost in the weight of old battles and quiet nights. A gentle truth settles into the room, as natural as sunlight and as quiet as grace. Not every miracle arrives with thunder. Some come in the shape of a life no larger than a pair of cupped hands, choosing to stay. And in that simple choice, two hearts find their way back to hope.